Selamat siang, bapak-bapak dan ibu-ibu. Hari ini saya masak Sate Lilit Sapi. Hello everyone, welcome to another video. I hope you're doing absolutely great. Today I'm going to make Sate Lilit out of beef. This is perhaps the most recognizable Balinese dish that most people who visit Bali notice. Additionally, this has a little bit of a reputation in Bali as being a little bit of a celebration food because it's easy to make for crowds, and it's also a little bit extravagant. This is one of the most expensive meals that I can make here in Berlin. So that's the basic introduction and maybe why you should think it an interesting dish to look at or try. But there's another side to it that I want to describe also, and that is that within Balinese society, one thing I've heard every single cooking class I went to in Bali, one thing I was told is that while in everyday cooking, usually the women are heavily involved, but in Bali, like the big festivals and the big celebrations typically are mostly cooked by the men, and the women sort of get a break from the cooking. So this is also kind of a more of a masculine dish to make as well, at least because of its association with celebrations and things like that. Finally, one thing I'm going to note here is that I'm reusing some pieces from the ayam sama mata. So you may want to go take a look at that video first, but if you haven't, or you want to look at this video first and then look at the other one, fine. I'm going to copy and paste the descriptions for the how to make the spice paste here because I'm using leftover spice paste from that one. So thanks. Now let's look at the ingredients. So one of the things that surprised me about Balinese food is how much beef they eat. Beef is somewhat central to some of these dishes, including Sate Lilit. And while it's not eaten in massive quantities, they fill it out with a lot of coconut. It is eaten in Balinese cuisine and may or may not have all of the same religious connotations that it does in India, despite the fact that Bali is mostly Hindu. The second thing I have here is a bunch of spice paste left over from the ayam sama mata. It's the same spice paste. I'll paste the description in there on how to make it. I have a lime. Normally you would use the Balinese limes, but I can't get them here, so we'll just use a regular lime. Lime leaf. Lemongrass, but this is unusual because the lemongrass will actually be the satay skewer. So I might cut these in half and try to get more skewers out of them. But yeah, that's that. You can also use pieces of sugar cane or even bamboo. But typically if they do bamboo skewers for Sate Lilit, they're very thick skewers. They're not like the small ones. And then of course I have coconut milk. And you can make your own coconut milk by just taking coconut and blending it with some water in the blender. But I just decided to use the very creamy coconut at the store. You really want a very creamy one. This one's basically 91% coconut and 9% water. So it's, you know, mostly what you would get if you were to try to make a really thick coconut milk yourself. So the first thing I'm going to do, I have half the coconut out of the shell here, is I'm going to grate this on a star grater on the coarse side. And basically what's going to happen is I should get this may work. On the other hand, maybe this will work too. Yeah, I'm going to just use the shredder side. The shredder is a little bit too coarse. The coarse star grater is a little bit too fine. So I'm going to go ahead and grate about a bit of this on the coarse side, and then I will grate the rest of it on the star grater. Probably makes more sense to go the other way since this part's harder on your fingers. So in Indonesia, the traditional grater is actually a board with spikes on it. So it's similar to a star grater, it's just a coarser grate. So I'm just going to grate a bunch of this, and I'll be back when I have it. So now I've heated my wok up, and I'm going to dry roast this coconut in the wok. And it'll shrink down a little bit, so we'll roast more than we need and come back and measure it after we roast it. Be back in a few minutes once this is roasted so you can see what this looks like, and then we'll go from there. So basically now I'm just barely seeing the very beginnings of brown appearing from the roasting. So I'm just gonna do this for another minute or so, maybe less, and I'll take it off. The goal is to have something that's somewhat dried out, nicely toasted, but we don't want it completely dry or completely browned. And you can see from the texture that it's already drying out nicely. So this doesn't need to be on for too much longer. Maybe another 30 seconds. Yeah, look at that. Now, normally they would also use fried shallots or bawang goreng, but I don't have any of those today. And the general rule is if you're missing something, just skip it. So I'm just going to leave those out. You can usually find bawang goreng in stores that sell Indonesian groceries. All right. I'm going to let this go just for another 30 seconds, I guess. It's not cooking quite as fast as I was expecting, and then I'll take it off. So now you can see just the beginnings of widespread brown, and this is as far as we want to take this. So I'll take this off the heat now, and we'll go ahead and get the sauté started. Now, proportions are kind of whatever you'd like. Traditionally in Bali, they use more coconut and less beef when they serve it for their own festivities than when they serve it to foreigners. And part of that is that coconut's very plentiful and beef is quite a bit less so. So I'm going to start with about 250 grams of beef. I may add more later. To this, I'm going to add one good handful of coconut. I will add a significant spoonful, that's like maybe 3 tablespoons of the spice paste. And you know what, I'm just gonna add the whole thing because I can cook it and take it in for lunch, I guess, one of these days. So add more spice paste. Yeah. From here I'm going to knead all these ingredients together. Don't have to knead them all the way because I still have more stuff coming in. And once it's kind of mixed together, I'm going to let it sit while I finely chop the lime leaves and get the coconut milk ready. In go the lime leaves. We'll squeeze in maybe half of this lime, so if it was a Balinese lime, those have lots of seeds, so we would separate that out. And then I would say enough of this creamy coconut milk to kind of make it soft and pliable. And now I'm really going to mix it together well. And now I'm mixing it together like I would if I were making sausage. This is like more of a kneading process at this point than it is like just a mixing process. If you're making hamburgers, of course, you really don't want to heavily mix things together because the meat will become tough as the minced pieces kind of get pulled apart. But here what we're kind of interested in doing is creating this sort of meat mixture that I can then put on the sauté skewers. And this is actually smelling really good. And we now have our meat mixture for the Sate Lilit. So now I've cut these lemongrass stalks in half so that I can get more skewers. Now traditionally these are cooked over coconut charcoal on banana leaves. However, since I don't have banana leaves, I'm going to bake them in the oven under the grill, under the broiler, and I'll put them on parchment paper. The whole purpose of banana leaf in this case is to keep it from sticking. And the way that these are normally formed is that you take a ball of meat and you just rotate it onto the piece of lemongrass. And as this cooks, of course, it will pick up a little bit of flavor from the lemongrass. And we're going to get 12 pieces here. So, handful of meat goes onto one of the skewers. And then normally they basically pinch it around like this. Sate Lilit means wrapped satay, which is a kind of a decent description of it. And just for space reasons, I'm gonna alternate them like this. So I'll come back when all of this is done, and then we'll talk about cooking. All right, so here I have my 12 skewers, and I'm gonna cook them all now because I'm going to take them in for lunch while I'm working this week. So I decided after thinking about it to put them in the oven with the bottom heat on because that's the closest I can get to coconut charcoal. And I'm also turning on the fan, although I assume if you're an American you don't have a fan in your oven. So that's totally optional. And then I'm just going to put these in the oven, and I will turn them over in maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll go from there. Once they're cooked all the way through, then they're ready to take out and then serve. Now, Sate Lilit isn't traditionally served with a peanut sauce, so I'm not making any. There are recipes for peanut sauces if you want, but technically this isn't really a peanut sauce kind of satay. So these have been in for 20-25 minutes. I've alternated between the broiler and the normal oven settings. This is looking pretty good, and I'm going to let these cool down for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll be back for the taste test. So to plate these up, as far as like if I were serving them for dinner, is fairly simple. I'm just going to line them up on a plate. Actually, let me do it this way. Yeah. That shouldn't happen. Normally it doesn't, but sometimes it does. And then I would just basically line them up like this. The way to think about these is they're basically meatballs on a stick. So I've just off-center cut these pieces of tomato, and now we have a plate of Sate Lilit Sapi with tomatoes as a garnish. So on to the taste test. And now for the taste test. This smells delicious. This is absolutely amazing right here. Absolutely amazing. I strongly, strongly recommend trying this. I can't really describe how good it is. You have the crunchy coconut, the meat, the savory spices, the little bit of sourness from the lime juice. It all comes together really, really nicely. This is good. It's absolutely delicious. Anyway, bon appetit. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.